There is a verse in a song from a 2012 Cartoon Network episode that a generation of viewers in the United Kingdom, Italy, Poland, and most of Spain has never heard. The verse is not lost. It exists. It is still on the Region 1 DVD, still on the United States cable broadcast, still on the streaming master that any person in North America can play tonight. But for roughly 40 seconds, depending on the feed, the song goes quiet on the international broadcast. The lip movement does not match what plays, and the listener at home assumes the song was always this length. The absence is invisible to the people for whom it is the default. The absence is the version of the show they grew up with. There is a single shot in another episode, also Cartoon Network, also early seasons, where a character drives a spoon into the back of her own hand. The shot is 1 second long. It is part of a sustained joke about an unreliable narrator, and the joke is what the shot exists to serve. In the Asia-Pacific broadcast of that same episode, the shot is not there. The cut is so precise that the surrounding scene does not stumble. A viewer in Manila or Sydney watching that episode for the first time in 2012 received an episode that worked, that played as intended, that landed every other beat. The viewer did not feel the cut. The viewer never knew there had been one. There is a season 4 finale of the same show that the Cartoon Network Arabic feed declined to broadcast for years. Not edited, not trimmed, not aired and then withdrawn. Simply absent from the schedule, slid past, omitted from the rotation that played and replayed every other episode of season 4 in the same territory across the same period. A Lebanese teenager who watched Adventure Time every afternoon in 2013 reached the end of season 4 and the show resumed in season 5 without that finale ever having happened. The story continued. The narrative skipped a beat the viewer could not hear because the beat had been deleted from the score before the orchestra began to play. This is a video essay about banned and altered episodes of Adventure Time. It is also a video essay about a particular fact that does not get said often enough. The fact is that almost every banned episode has 2 lives. The first life is the one the episode was made as, written and storyboarded and animated and scored and finalized inside the production at Cartoon Network Studios in Burbank. The second life is the one syndication turned the episode into when it crossed a border. The 2 lives are not the same episode. The 2 lives sometimes disagree about whether a song has a verse, whether a finale exists, whether a character can be assassinated by a tiny cat, whether 2 people kissed at the end of a war. And the second life, the syndication life, is the one most non-United States viewers grew up with. That is the version that lived. That is the version that became, for hundreds of millions of children outside North America, what Adventure Time actually was. Welcome to Tome. Get comfortable. You are going to want to stay for this one. Let us get into it. The episode that ended a working relationship between 2 production companies aired on September 26th, 2011. It is Season 3, Episode 10. The title is What Was Missing. The premise is small and structurally elegant. A door demon arrives at the tree fort, removes a precious item from each member of the main cast, and traps them behind a door that will only open if they perform a song together about something true. They form a band. The band is bad. They start to play and the band gets better. The song that finally opens the door is about wanting to be close to someone, and it is sung by Marceline, the vampire who has been on the periphery of the show since the first season. In a register the show has not used for her before. The door opens. The items are returned. The crew goes home. From the inside of the episode, this is a story about friends working through tension to make something honest. The episode does not name the tension. It does not have to. It just lets the song happen. The episode lives a second life in the days after it airs. A recap appears on the Frederator Studios blog. Frederator is the production company that incubated Adventure Time before Cartoon Network Studios took it over, and the company maintains a recap channel that follows the show with affection and detail. The recap is written by a producer at Frederator named Dan Rickmers. The recap reads the song Marceline sings to Princess Bubblegum as romantic. It uses the language of attraction. It treats what most adult viewers had already read between the lines as the actual text of the episode. The recap is not the only place this reading exists. It is one of many. But it is the one that is hosted on the official blog of the company that helped create the show. The recap is taken down. Rickmers is fired. Frederator's founder, Fred Siebert, posts an explanation that names the firing and frames it as a decision about Frederator's role. Siebert is explicit that no pressure came from Cartoon Network. No pressure came from the Adventure Time crew. The firing was an internal Frederator decision about how a Frederator employee had spoken in public about a show Frederator no longer controlled. Within days, Frederator announces that the recap project, called Mathematical, is being shut down entirely. The show continues. The crew continues. The recap channel goes dark. Sit with what the syndication life of this episode actually means. The episode aired in the United States as the episode that it is. In the second life, the one that propagated through international press in 2011 and 2012, the episode became famous not for the song, but for the firing. The episode became a story about a producer who got too close to the text and lost his job for it. That story is the one a non-United States viewer was likely to encounter first. The episode arrived overseas already framed. The framing was about boundaries. The framing was about what a recap was allowed to say a song was. By the time the episode itself reached a viewer in Madrid or Seoul, the meaning of the song had been pre-litigated in a way that had nothing to do with the song. What was missing from the episode, in the negative space sense, was not anything inside the cut. The 13 minutes were intact. What was missing was the freedom to read the episode plainly. The recap had attempted that reading, and the consequences of the recap demonstrated that the plain reading was, at minimum, a thing a careful person could lose a job over. So the song became something else. The song became the song that you could hear but could not say what it meant. The song became the song with the gap around it. The gap is what most viewers received. The episode also does something quiet that is easy to miss. The recap is not the only second life. The blog post was archived and republished and screenshot and translated. The reading that lost a producer his job became the reading the song was identified with. The episode became, in non-United States circulation, an episode about subtext that everybody had agreed in advance to keep as subtext. That agreement was the syndication life. The agreement did not exist inside the episode. The agreement is what the episode was wrapped in by the time it traveled. There is a moment in the song where Marceline pauses. The pause is roughly 2 seconds. The pause is the place where the song decides whether to land its honesty or to retreat. The pause is also the place where, in the years after, every conversation about this episode tended to stop. The 2 seconds became symbolic of what the song could and could not do. The 2 seconds are the song's negative space. The 2 seconds are what was missing from the readings that were allowed to circulate. The episode is one of the cleanest examples of the central pattern this essay will trace. The pattern is that the United States version of an episode and the international version of an episode are often two different objects. Sometimes the difference is a cut. Sometimes the difference is a frame. Sometimes the difference is a paratext, a recap, a press cycle, a firing that travels faster than the episode itself. The international viewer receives the episode plus the wrapper. The United States viewer receives the episode alone. The episode that becomes the canonical version for any given viewer is the one their feed delivered. Both feeds delivered something different. Both feeds delivered Adventure Time. Both feeds are the show. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The episode is Season 3, Episode 18. The title is The Creeps. It first aired on February 13th, 2012. The structure is a single-location horror pastiche set inside a mansion that materializes one night for a costume party. Each guest is murdered in turn by a hooded figure. The murders are funny because the show telegraphs that nothing is what it appears to be, that the costume party is a frame, that the murders are not murders. The hooded figure is eventually revealed to be a member of the cast in collusion with the others. There is no death. There is a joke about death, layered on a joke about a horror movie, layered on a joke about the way the show is willing to use horror as a costume. One of the gags inside the episode involves a fake death scene. A character pretends to stab herself with a spoon. The shot is short. The spoon makes contact with the back of her hand. The character collapses. The scene continues. The death is meaningless because the episode has already told the viewer that none of the deaths are real. The shot exists to make the unreality of the murders louder, not to perform an act of self-harm. The shot is a beat in a comedy. The Cartoon Network Asia Pacific feed declined the shot. The episode aired across the region without that 1 second of footage. The cut is precise. The animation immediately before and immediately after the shot can be edited together with a quick dissolve that makes the cut nearly invisible. A viewer who watched the episode on the Asia Pacific feed received an episode that worked. The horror pastiche played. The fake deaths played. The reveal at the end played. The episode that arrived in the region was, by the metric of internal coherence, a complete episode. It was just not the episode that had been made. Think about what that actually means. A network sat down and watched the episode. The network identified a single shot that the network's standards and practices framework for a regional market with a younger nominal age band could not permit. The network cut the shot. The episode lost 1 second. The episode survived the loss. The episode entered the rotation. The viewers in Manila and Sydney and Jakarta watched the version without the shot for years. That version, the one without the shot, is what The Creeps is for those viewers. The version with the shot is a different episode they have never seen. The cut is not a censorship of the show's intent. The show's intent, which was the gag, survives. The show's intent in the wider sense, which was the episode as a comedic horror pastiche, also survives. What is lost is one specific image. The image is a character pretending to harm herself with a kitchen implement. The image is unambiguous about being pretend. The image is also, in isolation, an image of a character pretending to harm herself with a kitchen implement. The Asia-Pacific feed weighed those two readings and chose the second. The result is an episode that is 1 second shorter and one image lighter than what aired in the United States that February afternoon. The Creeps is also a useful place to introduce a quieter point about how these international cuts function. The cuts are almost never about an episode's politics. They are about images. They are about specific frames. They are about what a regional standards body has been told it cannot show, which is usually a narrow list of physical actions: violence to children, sexual contact, drug use, self-harm. The list does not bend to context. The list does not care that the show is making a joke. The list applies the moment the image appears, and the image is removed if the list says it must be. The geography of the cut, in this sense, is just the geography of a regulatory list. The list is what reaches the viewer in the form of an absence the viewer cannot identify. There is a small additional fact about The Creeps that is worth holding. The episode runs 11 minutes in its standard cut. The Asia-Pacific cut runs 10 minutes and 59 seconds. The difference between the two episodes is not interpretive. It is metric. It is 1 second of broadcast time. A child who watched the episode on the Asia-Pacific feed and then years later, as an adult, watched the United States cut on a streaming service will encounter that second as new. The new second will not feel new. It will feel like a second that has been added. The viewer will be unable to remember the experience of not having seen it. The episode will have become, retroactively, an episode they had been missing without knowing it. The earliest episode this essay has to consider is the only first season episode to be refused by a Cartoon Network international feed. The episode is Season 1, Episode 25. The title is His Hero. It first aired on November 22, 2010. The episode is about Finn meeting his hero, a retired warrior named Billy. Billy is voiced by Lou Ferrigno, the actor who played the Hulk in the late 1970s live-action series. The casting is itself a small statement about what this episode is. Billy is enormous. Billy is gentle. Billy has decided, in his retirement, that violence is the wrong answer. Billy wants to do good in a way that does not involve hitting things. Finn, who is 12, has spent the entire first season learning to hit things. The episode is a conversation between those two positions. Finn and Jake try to take Billy's lesson seriously. They try to do good without violence. They wander trying to help people in ways that do not involve their swords. They fail repeatedly, and the failures are presented as failures, not as ironic gestures. The episode does not let them off the hook. The episode does not say that violence was the right answer all along. The episode lets them lose at non-violence for a while, and then it lets them realize that non-violence as a doctrine, applied without judgment, is also a way of failing the people you are trying to help. The episode is, in its quiet way, a treatise on the limits of pacifism delivered to a children's audience by a 1970s bodybuilder voicing a retired barbarian. The Cartoon Network Australia feed refused the episode. The Cartoon Network Philippines feed refused the episode. The refusal was specific. The other 25 episodes of Season 1 aired in both territories on schedule. His Hero did not. A viewer in Sydney or Manila who watched Adventure Time in 2011 received a Season 1 that ended at Episode 24 and resumed at Episode 26. The numbering of the rotation did not announce the gap. The gap was simply absent from the schedule. The viewers did not know what they were not seeing. The reason for the refusal is contained in the episode's content. The episode includes a sequence in which Finn and Jake misunderstand non-violence to mean physical interference with crimes in progress. They attempt to physically restrain a robber. The restraint goes wrong. They throw the robber into a pit. The pit is a joke, but the throwing is animated cleanly enough that the broadcast standards in two markets read the action as a depiction of children inflicting harm on an adult. The reading does not match the show's intent. The show's intent is the failure, not the harm. The standards reading is about what is on screen, not what the show meant by it. The two readings did not reconcile. The feed refused the episode. What this means, in the negative space sense, is that an entire population of early Adventure Time viewers in two countries grew up with a first season that did not contain its meditation on heroism. The meditation was the episode. The episode was the meditation. Without it, Season 1 is a collection of adventure premises with a recurring boy hero who has not yet been asked to think hard about what heroism means. The thinking is what his hero is for. The thinking is what those viewers did not see. Season 2 of the show begins to ask Finn questions about who he is becoming as a hero. Those questions in those markets arrive without the preface his hero was supposed to provide. There is an additional consequence. Billy is a character that the show keeps. Billy returns. Billy becomes structurally important in Season 4 and Season 5. Billy's death is a major moment that drives a long arc. The viewers in Australia and the Philippines who watched the show in 2011 and 2012 met Billy in those later appearances without the introduction his hero had set up. They met Billy as a character about whom Finn had strong feelings the show expected them to share. They had not been given the basis for those feelings. They had to construct it from context. They could do it. The show is generous enough to allow it. But the construction was theirs, not the show's. And what they constructed was their own version of Billy, not the one the writers had assumed the audience already had. The episode is one of the cleanest cases of a phenomenon this essay will return to. The phenomenon is that a banned episode is not only a missing object. A banned episode is a missing relationship between the viewer and a character, or a theme that the rest of the show treats as established. The relationship has to be built somewhere else, or it does not get built. The non-United States viewer becomes, in this respect, a slightly different kind of viewer than the United States viewer. The two viewers know different versions of the same character. The two viewers carry different emotional weight into the same later scene. The two viewers are watching a show that, at the level of accumulated relationships, is not quite the same show. The next case is a smaller episode that ran into the same standards walls in the same two markets for a different reason. The episode is Season 3, Episode 22. The title is Jake vs. Meow. It first aired on June 25th, 2012. The premise is a small, contained farce. A tiny assassin cat named Meow has been hired to kill someone. The cat enlists Jake. The plot proceeds. The cat is voiced as a tiny voice with grand ambitions. The episode is funny because Meow is a serious assassin in a body that cannot reach the doorknob. The episode is also, in its plot mechanics, about a paid assassination. The Cartoon Network Australia feed refused the episode. The Cartoon Network Philippines feed refused the episode. The reason was straightforward and matches the reason for several of the cuts in this catalogue. The episode's plot is built on a contract murder. The murder does not occur. The episode is too smart to commit the murder. But the structure of the episode is the planning of a contract murder by two parties, one of whom is a small mammal in a hood. The standards bodies in those two markets had a category for assassination plots in children's programming. The category was no. The episode was refused. What this absence means for an Australian or Filipino viewer of Adventure Time is specific. Meow returns to the show. Meow has another episode in Season 5. Meow becomes a recurring villain in the way the show often allows small, weird antagonists to recur. The introduction of Meow is in the refused episode. The character Meow appears in Season 5, in the markets where her introduction did not air, as a stranger. The viewer can follow the second episode. The viewer can enjoy the second episode. The viewer just does not have the joke that Meow is a previously established assassin returning to the show. The joke is replaced by a smaller joke, which is that here is a tiny assassin cat. The smaller joke is fine. It is not the same joke. The pattern repeats. A banned episode is not only an absence in the catalogue. A banned episode is a held breath the rest of the show keeps taking, in the form of references and callbacks and reappearances that quietly fail to land for the viewer who did not see the breath being drawn. The show keeps drawing breath. The viewer keeps not hearing it. The show plays on, slightly muted in the way of any conversation where one party has missed an earlier sentence and is too polite to ask what was said. The Australian and Filipino refusals are also instructive about how few of these refusals actually happened. The exhaustive list of episodes that Cartoon Network Australia and Cartoon Network Philippines refused outright across the entire run of Adventure Time is short. The 3 episodes are His Hero in Season 1, The Creeps in Season 3, and Jake vs. Meow in Season 3. 3 episodes out of more than 280. The story of Adventure Time, as a routinely banned show in the Asia Pacific, is not the story the catalogue supports. The story is more interesting than that. The story is that those 3 episodes, and only those 3 episodes, hit a standards line that the rest of the show, with all its violence and weirdness and theological darkness, somehow did not. The 3 episodes share something. They share specificity. They share images or premises that a standards body could point at without ambiguity. The rest of the show, which is constantly weird in ways that are harder to point at, slid past. The catalogue of refusals is the catalogue of what a regulator could name. Everything the regulator could not name aired. The next case is the first one in this catalogue where an episode aired and was then pulled, rather than refused before it aired. The episode is Season 4, Episode 10. The title is Goliad. It first aired in the United States on July 2nd, 2012. The premise is one of the most ambitious in the series to that point. Princess Bubblegum has created a new being. The being is biological, partly engineered from her own DNA. The being is called Goliad. Goliad is intended to be the immortal future ruler of the Candy Kingdom, a permanent successor who will not need to worry about politics in the way a mortal ruler would. The episode is the introduction of Goliad. The episode is also, very quickly, the introduction of the problem with Goliad. Goliad has psychic powers. Goliad does not understand morality. Goliad uses the psychic powers to dominate the Candy citizens almost as soon as the powers manifest. The episode is dense with ideas. The episode is about lineage. The episode is about what a ruler owes the ruled. The episode is about the ethics of creating an heir for a throne. The episode is also, in its closing image, about Princess Bubblegum kneeling on the ground with a second creation, a partial twin of Goliad named Stormo, and announcing that the only way to contain the daughter she made is the son she now makes. The episode ends with Stormo and Goliad in psychic combat that will continue for as long as both of them are alive. The episode lets the combat be the resolution. The combat is unwon. The episode hands the audience an open-ended apocalyptic standoff and walks off screen. The episode was pulled from broadcast rotation in Australia, the United Kingdom, Spain, and Italy after its first airings in those territories. The reasons given by the various regional Cartoon Network operations were not uniform. Some cited the depictions of psychic control as inappropriate for the target age band. Some cited the ending as too dark for a children's program. The result, regardless of the stated reasons, was the same. The episode aired once in those markets and then disappeared from the rotation. Cartoon Network's standard practice with Adventure Time across all markets was heavy reruns. Episodes aired and re-aired across a single week and across multiple seasons in repeat blocks. Goliad aired and did not re-air. The episode became, in those 4 markets, a one-time event followed by a silence. The negative space effect is severe in this case. Goliad is the keystone of an arc that runs through the rest of Season 4, into Season 5, and recurs across the series. Princess Bubblegum's relationship with Goliad, her grief about Goliad, her sense of having created a problem she cannot solve, are referenced repeatedly in later episodes. The references assume the viewer knows what Goliad is, what Stormo is, what they are doing in the sky above the Candy Kingdom in their endless silent fight. A viewer in Madrid or Rome who watched Adventure Time in 2012 and 2013 might have caught Goliad on its first airing. The viewer might also have missed it. The viewer in either case did not have the option to catch up with it on repeat broadcast. The arc continued without the foundation. The arc landed differently. The arc, for those viewers, was about a princess with a haunted look and a series of unexplained references to children she had made. There is something specific about this case that distinguishes it from refusals like His Hero and Jake vs. Meemaw. Those were refusals at the gate. The episode never reached the audience. Goliad was different. Goliad aired. The audience saw it. Then the network pulled the episode, and the audience could not see it again. The audience knew there had been an episode. The audience could remember pieces of it. The audience could discuss it with other people who had seen the same broadcast. But the audience could not return to it. The episode became a memory in a way that other episodes did not. The episode became, for that audience, the version of the episode that lived in their first viewing and their conversation about it, never the version that lived in their second viewing or their 10th. This is a different kind of absence. This is the absence of repetition. Adventure Time is a show that has always benefited from repetition. The episodes are short, the plotting is dense, the visual jokes reward multiple viewings, the themes accumulate across rewatches. Pulling an episode after a single airing strips that episode of the rewatch function. The episode becomes a thing the viewer saw once, did not fully process, and could not return to. The episode becomes a fading negative. The viewer's memory of the episode is the only copy. The episode is also unusual because it is one of the episodes the show needed the audience to think hard about. The themes are not buried, they are surfaced. The episode wants the viewer to weigh whether Princess Bubblegum was right to make Goliad. The episode wants the viewer to feel the weight of Stormo's existence as a counterweight that will hold for centuries. The episode wants the viewer to come back. The pulling of the episode after a single airing meant that the viewer could not come back. The thinking the episode wanted to provoke had to happen in one sitting. The thinking the episode wanted to provoke was usually too much for one sitting. The thinking did not happen. The episode passed through the viewer once and was gone, leaving the rest of the show's references to it floating without grounding. The geography of Goliad's removal is also worth noting. The 4 markets that pulled it are Australia, the United Kingdom, Spain, and Italy. The 4 markets cover, roughly, English-speaking Oceania and 3 of the largest European broadcast markets for Cartoon Network. The list is not exhaustive of the markets that might have had concerns. Other European markets aired the episode without pulling it. The Latin American Cartoon Network feed aired the episode without pulling it. The pulling of an episode from rotation is not a single global decision. It is a series of regional decisions made by regional standards teams, each operating against a slightly different rulebook. The result is a map of the show that has different rules in different places. The map is not labeled. The viewer is just in the place where the map says what the map says. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next case is the largest single absence in this catalogue. The episode is Season 4, Episode 26. The title is The Lich. It first aired on October 22nd, 2012. It is the Season 4 finale. It is the culmination of a long arc that has been running through the show for 2 seasons. The Lich is the antagonist who appeared in Season 2 and has been positioned as the most serious threat the show has. The Lich is not a comic villain. The Lich is an extinction-level entity who wants the universe to end. The episode is about an attempt to stop the Lich by sending a representative through a portal to a place where the Lich's influence does not reach. The representative is a mistake. The episode ends in a way that is meant to land like the closing chord of a symphonic movement, leaving the listener leaning forward into Season 5. The Cartoon Network Arabic feed did not air the episode for years. The other 25 episodes of Season 4 aired. The first episodes of Season 5 aired. The Lich was not in the rotation. The reasons given internally were never fully made public, but the operating theory inside fan communities, eventually corroborated by industry reporting in the late 2000s, was that the regional standards team had identified the episode's mythological content, its handling of death, and its imagery of a destroyer entity as outside what the regional regulator would approve. Rather than cut the episode into a version that could air, the network chose not to air it at all. The episode existed in the Arabic language Adventure Time catalogue only as a number that was missing. The consequence is the largest negative space event in the show's international history. A child in Lebanon, or the United Arab Emirates, or Egypt, who watched Adventure Time on the Cartoon Network Arabic feed in 2012 and 2013, reached the end of Season 4 and did not have a Season 4 finale. The show that resumed in Season 5 resumed with a different scene than the one that the finale would have prepared. The opening of Season 5 depends on the closing of Season 4. The opening of Season 5 was, for those viewers, an opening that did not have its closing. The narrative did not stumble. The show is generous enough that the Season 5 opener works as a thing in itself. The viewer could follow. The viewer could not feel the bottom of the chord that the Season 5 opener was supposed to ring against, because the chord had not been played. The Lich as a character continues to appear across the show's run. The Lich's defeat, the Lich's reappearance, the Lich's role in the show's mythology, all of these depend on the events of the Season 4 finale. The viewer in the Arabic language territory, who continued with Adventure Time across the rest of its run, accumulated references to events they had never seen. The show would mention the Lich's actions. The viewer would understand from context that something had happened. The viewer would not have the image. The image is the thing the show is built on. The image is what makes the reference resonant. The viewer received the references stripped of the resonance and learned to live with the references as references, knowing that something was being indicated that they could not see. Turkey and the broader Middle East, which were served by feeds that inherited the cuts from the United Kingdom, or the regional Arabic feed depending on the operator, mostly saw the United Kingdom cut of Season 4. The United Kingdom cut of Season 4 did not omit the Lich. The United Kingdom cut of Season 4 did trim certain sequences from the episode. The trims were largely cosmetic in the European Union sense, removing or shortening particular images that did not pass the United Kingdom standards for children's animated programming. The Turkish viewer who watched the episode via the United Kingdom feed got a Season 4 finale that was almost the United States cut, with several visual moments shortened or removed. The complication is that operators in the region did not all use the same source feed. Some operators ran the Arabic feed, some ran the United Kingdom feed, some ran a hybrid that depended on the time slot. The result, across the Middle East in 2012 and 2013, was that the experience of having or not having the Lich was not uniform. It depended on the operator. It depended on the household. Some viewers saw a version of the episode. Some viewers saw nothing. The show fractured along the lines of the cable provider in a way it had not fractured anywhere else. The negative space biography of the Lich is therefore not one biography, but several. There is the viewer who saw the full United States cut. There is the viewer who saw the United Kingdom cut. There is the viewer who saw the Arabic feed and saw nothing. There is the viewer who saw the inherited United Kingdom cut on an Arabic region operator. Each of these viewers has a different Adventure Time. Each of them watched the same season finale at the same level of cultural exposure, the same year, the same age, and ended up with a different episode, or with no episode at all. The show in their memory is the episode they got. The episode they got is a function of which cable plan their parents bought. This is the most concrete demonstration of the thesis. The negative space biography is not metaphorical here. The negative space is literal. The episode in the Arabic feed is a number with nothing behind it. The episode in the United Kingdom feed is a slightly thinner version of the United States cut. The episode in the United States is the made object. 3 versions. Each is the show. Each was the show that someone grew up with. The viewer who calls the United States version the real one is making a claim about which feed they trust, not a claim about which feed was the original. All 3 feeds were original. The original is whichever one delivered the episode to the screen that was on at the time. The episode itself, in its uncut form, runs 11 minutes. The United Kingdom cut runs 10 minutes and 43 seconds. The Arabic absence runs 11 minutes of nothing. The viewer in those markets accumulated those minutes elsewhere, in other episodes, in other content, in their own afternoons. The viewer who never saw the Lich did not have an empty afternoon. The viewer had an afternoon with a different episode in that slot. The slot was filled. The slot was always filled. The slot was just filled with something other than the season 4 finale the United States viewer was watching at the same time. There is something this essay needs to state plainly. The history of Adventure Time, as it traveled internationally, is not the history of a show that was repeatedly silenced. It is the history of a show that was repeatedly translated. Each market did not simply receive the show. Each market re-edited the show into a version the local broadcast environment could carry. The local viewer received that version as the show. The version that aired is, for that viewer, the only version that ever existed. The version that did not air, the United States cut, the unedited finale, the song with the verse, the kiss in the field, exists for the local viewer only as a thing they may have read about, may have downloaded illicitly, may have seen years later when streaming opened the catalogue up. The version that aired is the show. The show is the version that aired. The next case is the cleanest example of a song surviving multiple translations and arriving in different bodies in different places. The episode is Season 5, Episode 11. The title is Bad Little Boy. It first aired on November 12, 2012. The premise is a gender-flipped fanfiction-style retelling of a Marceline and Finn dynamic, presented from inside the fanfiction. The main character is Marshall Lee, the gender-flipped Marceline, who is a vampire. The episode is told in the voice of a Fiona and Cake story. The song in question is a song Marshall Lee sings about being a bad little boy who is not as bad as he seems. The song is the emotional center of the episode. The song is what the episode is built around. The song runs roughly 2 minutes in the United States cut. The song lost roughly 40 seconds in the United Kingdom, Italy, Poland, and parts of Spain. The cut is not a single cut. The cut is several smaller cuts inside the song, removing verses that the standards bodies in those markets considered inappropriate. The cuts are not seamless. The lip animation continues. The audio drops. The viewer who watches the song in the Polish broadcast sees Marshall Lee opening his mouth and hearing the music change. The cuts are noticeable. The cuts are also accepted. They are accepted because they are how the song arrived. The version of the song without the verses became, for an entire generation of viewers in those markets, the version of the song that exists. In Spain, the cut was applied to reruns. The first airing of the episode in Spain reportedly carried the United States cut. Subsequent reruns carried the shortened version. The Spanish viewer who watched the first airing of Bad Little Boy received the full song. The Spanish viewer who came to the episode later, on a repeat broadcast, received the truncated song. The 2 versions coexisted in the Spanish language territory for years, with the first airing's audience knowing a song the rerun audience did not have, and with neither group able to convince the other that their version was the canonical one. Latin America had a different cut. The Latin American Spanish language broadcast of Bad Little Boy reportedly modified one of the verses sung by Cake the Cat. The original verse, sung by Cake in the United States cut, includes a line that the Latin American standards team flagged. The Latin American version replaced the line with the words, "I am not trying to be bad." The replacement is in Spanish, on a different syllabic structure than the original English, and lands as a different beat. The song now contains a line that asserts the character is not trying to be bad. The original song did not contain that assertion. The Latin American viewer of Bad Little Boy received an episode in which a character preemptively defends their intentions in a way the original character did not. The character changed in the translation. 3 lives for 1 song. The first is the United States cut, in which the song is whole and the song is the emotional spine of the episode. The second is the European cut, in which the song has lost roughly 40 seconds, and the spine is shorter and the song's argument is interrupted. The third is the Latin American cut, in which the song has been rewritten at a syllabic level to add a defensive line that softens what the song is doing. Each of these is a complete song. Each of these has been heard by millions of children. Each of these is what Bad Little Boy is for the listener in that market. The argument about which version is correct is not resolvable. The versions are not in competition. The versions are in geographic distribution. There is a quiet additional fact about this episode that this essay will mention once. The song was written and recorded by the show's storyboard artist who voiced Marshall Lee, an actor who would later become widely known outside the show's audience. The song is a small, careful artifact. The song was made to do a specific thing in the episode. The episode is the song. The song is the episode. Cutting 40 seconds from the song is not cutting 40 seconds from the episode. It is cutting 40 seconds from the structural argument the episode is making. The episode minus 40 seconds is not the same episode. The cut episode is a different episode that happens to share an air date with the United States cut. The interesting thing about the European cut is that it was applied identically across 4 broadcast territories. The cut is not a per-market reaction. The cut appears to have been propagated from a single source feed, likely the United Kingdom Cartoon Network operations, which then served as the feed for several of the other European markets through licensing arrangements. The cut became the European cut by virtue of one regional decision being inherited by the markets downstream of it. The Polish viewers' version of Bad Little Boy is the United Kingdom version of Bad Little Boy. The United Kingdom version of Bad Little Boy is the version the United Kingdom Cartoon Network team made. The chain of authorship for the version the Polish viewer encountered runs through Burbank, through Cartoon Network Europe, through the United Kingdom Standards team, and finally to the Polish broadcast technicians who pressed play on the file the European feed delivered them. Each of those hands modified the file. The viewer received the final state. This is also a useful point to make about authorship in syndication. The episode was made in Burbank, the episode was modified in London, the episode was rewritten in Mexico City for the Latin American feed. The episode that aired in any of these markets is the episode that all of those people made together, with the Burbank version as the starting draft and the local edits as the final polish. The episode is collaborative across borders in a way the credits never reflect. The credits list the Burbank crew. The credits do not list the London Standards team or the Mexico City translator who chose "I am not trying to be bad" as the replacement line. Those collaborators are uncredited co-authors. Their version is the one the viewer met. Their version is the show. The geography of song cuts is in some ways the most legible part of this whole catalogue. A song is a discrete unit. A song has a runtime. A song has lyrics. A song can be cut in a way that is documentable. The differences between the United States version of Bad Little Boy and the European version are countable. The differences between the United States version of Bad Little Boy and the Latin American version are translatable. The catalogue of variants exists. The variants are in the open. The thing the catalogue reveals is that the show as it travelled was not the show as it was made. The show as it travelled was a slightly different show in each place. The viewers in each place loved that slightly different show. The love was real. The thing they loved was not the same thing. The next case is the only case in this catalogue where the United States cut and the international cut share an absence that originated in the production itself rather than in syndication. The episode is the series finale. The title is Come Along With Me. It first aired on September 3rd, 2018. The episode is the conclusion of an arc that the show has been running since season 1. The episode is also the conclusion of a war arc that the show has been running since the previous season. The episode includes a sequence between Princess Bubblegum and Marceline that lands in a brief moment of physical affection. The moment is a kiss. The kiss is brief. The kiss is not announced by the music. The kiss is not commented on by other characters. The kiss happens, and the episode continues. The kiss was not in the outline. This is the fact this essay needs to surface. The episode's producer, Adam Muto, said in an interview after the series ended that the kiss was not in the script outline submitted to Cartoon Network. The outline contained an instruction, which Muto recalled as approximately the phrase, "have a moment." The instruction left it to the storyboard artist to interpret what the moment would be. The storyboard artist was Hannah K. Nystrom. Nystrom interpreted "have a moment" as a kiss. Nystrom drew the kiss. The kiss went through the production pipeline. The kiss made it to air. Think about what that actually means. The conclusion to a relationship that the show had been intimating across roughly 6 seasons was, in the production, an open instruction. The instruction was filled in by a storyboard artist with an interpretive choice. The choice was the kiss. The choice was a permanent canonical event for the show. The choice was made by a single person at a desk in Burbank looking at a sequence of panels and deciding what the panel marked "have a moment" should contain. The series ended with the choice. The show became, retroactively, a show in which the kiss was always going to happen, because the show is the version of the show that aired, and the version that aired contained the kiss. The negative space biography here is unusual. The international syndication of the finale, as far as has been publicly documented, did not omit the kiss. The kiss aired in most international territories on or near the United States air date. The kiss was not subject to the kind of song cut or shot cut that defined earlier episodes in this catalogue. The absence that defines Come Along With Me is therefore not a geographic absence. The absence is temporal. The absence is the gap between the outline and the storyboard. The outline did not contain the moment. The storyboard contained the moment. The two documents are both authentic. The episode that aired chose the storyboard. The episode that almost aired, the episode in which the moment was something other than a kiss, exists only in the outline. This is its own kind of negative space. The negative space is the version of the episode that would have aired if Nystrom had interpreted Have a Moment as something other than a kiss. The version is not lost. The version was never made. The version exists as a counterfactual that Muto's interview made public. The counterfactual is part of the episode's biography. The episode is the kiss and the path not taken. The episode is the storyboard artist's choice and the outline's silence. The episode is the only episode that exists, and it is also the only episode that could have existed, only because of the specific person who happened to be sitting at that desk in that month with that instruction in front of her. The interesting structural point is that this is the inverse of the syndication cut cases. The syndication cuts subtracted from an episode after it was made. The storyboard interpretation added to an episode while it was being made. Both processes produce an episode that is different from the episode the outline implied. Both processes produce an episode that is the canonical version because it is the version that exists. The difference between subtraction and addition is, from the viewer's standpoint, almost invisible. The viewer receives the final state. The viewer does not know whether the state was reached by adding or by removing. What the viewer does receive is the moment. The moment is 6.5 seasons of relationship resolved in a quiet kiss between two characters who have been orbiting each other since the 3rd season. The moment is held briefly. The moment is allowed to be brief. The show does not amplify the moment. The show treats the moment as one in a series of resolutions the finale is delivering across its runtime. The moment is in the episode the way most important moments in this show are in their episodes, which is to say without commentary and with the camera at the same patient distance it has always kept. The choice to film it that way was also a storyboard choice. The choice was also Nystrom's. The choice belongs to her. This is the finale of the show. This is the episode that closes the run. This is the episode that confirms or fails to confirm the relationships and arcs the audience has been carrying. The episode confirms the relationship. The confirmation is the kiss. The kiss is, in its production history, an interpretive contribution from a single artist. The show is the show plus that contribution. The show without that contribution would have been a different show. The viewer is not given access to the show without it. The viewer is given the show. The show is the show that aired. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next case is one that, strictly speaking, falls outside the original series and inside its continuation, but it belongs in this catalogue because it represents a different kind of absence that the streaming era introduced. The episode is the second of the 4 Distant Lands specials, released on HBO Max on November 19th, 2020. The title is Obsidian. The premise is a reunion between Princess Bubblegum and Marceline in their adulthood, set years after the events of the original series finale. The special is roughly 45 minutes long. It is a substantial piece of work. It was widely reviewed at the time of its release and was named one of the best television episodes of the year by several outlets, including the New York Times. It was, for the viewers who got it, a major event. The special was omitted from HBO Max's Southeast Asia rollout. The platform launched in that region without the second Distant Lands special. The other 3 Distant Lands specials were available. Obsidian was not. The reason for the omission was not formally stated by the platform at the time of launch, but the structural cause appears to have been the special centering of a romantic relationship between 2 women in a market where some of the regulatory environments did not permit such content on platforms classified for younger audiences. The platform's decision to omit the special, rather than provide a cut version, indicates that the content could not be cut without becoming a different thing. The special was the relationship. The relationship was the special. Cutting the special to remove the relationship would have left almost nothing of the episode. The geography of this omission is interesting because it is the first time in the catalogue where the absence is not just about a single scene, or a single song, or a single image. The absence is about the entire production. The Southeast Asian viewer of Adventure Time, who followed the show through its original run, through Distant Lands, through the streaming era, reached the second Distant Lands special, and the special was not there. The platform did not pretend the special did not exist. The platform simply did not carry it. The viewer who wanted to see it had to find it elsewhere. Many viewers did. Many viewers did not. The negative space biography in this case is the most explicit of the entire catalogue. The relationship that Come Along With Me had quietly confirmed in 2018 became the central subject of a 45-minute production in 2020. That production became, for the Southeast Asian streaming audience, the relationship that did not have an episode. The other Distant Lands episodes treated the original cast in ways that continued the original series. Obsidian treated two specific characters as a couple and made an extended argument for the relationship. Removing that production from a regional library removed the strongest single argument the franchise had ever made for the relationship from that region's view of the franchise. The viewer in Manila or Bangkok who had grown up with Adventure Time, who had received His Hero, and Jake vs. Mimo without those episodes, who had received Bad Little Boy with the truncated song, who had built their understanding of these characters across years of regional broadcasts, encountered the Distant Lands era with this final omission. The arc that had moved through subtext into text was, for that viewer, returned to subtext by the omission of the text. The show in that region kept the relationship as something the viewer could read into it. The show in other regions had the explicit text of Obsidian, making the reading no longer optional. The two viewers in 2021 were watching, in effect, two slightly different continuations of the same series. The continuation in one was settled. The continuation in the other was not. The show was the same show. The show was also two slightly different shows again. The Distant Lands case also marks a shift in the kind of editorial intervention that defines the catalogue. In the original series era, the interventions were cuts within episodes, refusals at the gate, removals from rotation. The interventions assumed that the episode was the unit. The episode could be modified or refused. The intervention happened to the episode. In the streaming era, the unit shifts. The unit is the catalogue. The intervention happens to the catalogue. An episode is omitted from a library. The library is the show. The library that the viewer can access is the show the viewer has. The viewer in the Southeast Asia HBO Max library had a show that did not contain Obsidian. The show was the show without Obsidian. That show is, for that viewer, what the show is. This is, in a sense, a new instrument for the same kind of editing. The instrument is not the cut. The instrument is the catalog management decision. The catalog management decision is faster, broader, and less visible than a cut. A viewer can sometimes notice a cut. A viewer rarely notices a missing entry in a catalog they did not know existed. The catalog management decision is therefore a more efficient instrument for shaping what the show is in any given region. The decision happens above the level of the episode. The decision is invisible from inside the episode. The decision is the entire episode being unavailable. The viewer registers the omission as nothing at all. The next case in this catalog is the broadest. It is not about an episode. It is about the show itself. In June 2017, the Kenya Film Classification Board, under the leadership of its then chief executive Ezekiel Mutua, pulled Adventure Time from the DSTV and GOTV services that carried Cartoon Network in Kenya. The board pulled the show along with 6 other animated programs from those services. The board's stated reason was that the programs contained content that, in the board's framing, was glorifying homosexual behavior. The board issued the order. The services complied. Adventure Time stopped being a thing one could watch on those services in Kenya. The viewer in Nairobi, who had been watching the show on a Tuesday afternoon, could not watch it on the Wednesday. This is the most radical version of the negative space biography. The negative space is the entire show. The viewer in Kenya did not lose a song. The viewer did not lose a finale. The viewer did not lose a single episode pulled from rotation. The viewer lost the show. The show simply was not on the schedule anymore. The other 6 programs, which included other Cartoon Network animation, also disappeared. The Kenyan child who had grown up with Adventure Time as part of their afternoon rotation in 2016 had a different afternoon by the end of 2017. The slot Adventure Time had occupied was filled with something else. The slot was always filled. The slot was just no longer filled with Adventure Time. The decision was not retracted in any meaningful way during the period when it would have mattered to the original broadcast audience. By the time the regulatory environment in Kenya might have shifted, Adventure Time was a streaming property whose accessibility in the region depended on which platforms were licensed to operate and which content those platforms carried. The pull from DSTV and GOTV was, for the broadcast audience, effectively permanent. The show became a thing one had to seek out. The show was no longer a thing one could simply turn on. The Kenyan case is also a useful reminder that regulatory action against a show is not always about a single scene or a single episode. Sometimes the action is about an accumulation. The accumulation, as understood by the regulator, was that Adventure Time, across its run, had developed in directions the regulator considered inappropriate. The regulator did not need to point to a specific scene. The regulator pointed to the show. The pull was about what the show, as a whole, had become. The show, as a whole, was a thing the regulator decided could not air. The pool was therefore not about a specific frame or a specific song. The pool was about the entire object. The fact that this is the most radical version of the negative space biography is also the fact that makes it instructive. The non-Kenyan viewer of Adventure Time has the full catalogue. The Kenyan viewer of Adventure Time, who relied on DSTV or GOTV, has, after June 2017, no catalogue. The two viewers were both watching Adventure Time across the same air dates. By the end of June 2017, only one of them still was. The negative space is total. The viewer's relationship with the show has been ended by external action. The viewer's memory of the show is what the viewer has left. This is, in some sense, the limit case of what this essay has been describing. The earlier cases were about partial absences, a second of footage, a verse of a song, a finale, a special. Each of those absences left most of the show intact. The viewer in those cases received a slightly different show. The viewer in the Kenyan case received no show. The accumulated logic of regional editorial intervention reached, in this case, its endpoint. The endpoint is the show itself being absent. Sit with that for a moment. The show that the United States viewer can stream tonight, in its full 11-season run, in its 4 Distant Lands specials, in its uncut songs and finales, is the same show that, in 2017, was pulled from access in an entire country by a board that decided the show had become something the country's children should not see. Both of those statements are true at the same time. The show is the show that is available to one viewer and the show that is not available to another. The show is both. The show has always been both. The catalogue of access has always been part of what the show is. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a quieter pattern across all of these cases that is worth surfacing. The pattern is that the editing happened upstream of the viewer in ways the viewer was not invited to know about. The viewer who watched The Creeps on the Asia Pacific feed in February 2012 was not told that the episode had been cut. The viewer who watched his hero never had Adventure Time announce that an episode in the rotation was missing. The viewer who watched Bad Little Boy in Poland was not told that the song had lost 40 seconds. The viewer who watched The Lich on the Cartoon Network Arabic feed was not told that the season finale was absent. The viewer who watched Adventure Time on DSTV in Kenya in June 2017 was not told that the schedule change reflected a regulatory pull. In each case, the editing was invisible at the point of consumption. The editing announced itself only later, if at all, when the viewer encountered the unedited version on some other platform or in some later year. This invisibility is structural to syndication. Syndication is the apparatus that delivers a finished thing to a viewer through a chain of intermediaries, each of which can modify the thing without notifying the viewer. The viewer is at the end of the chain. The viewer assumes the thing they receive is the thing that was made. The viewer's assumption is wrong, almost always wrong, in any market where the chain runs through a regional standards team. The thing the viewer receives is the thing the chain produced. The chain produced something that did not exist before the chain. The chain produced the show as it is in that market. The viewer's experience of the show is the chain's output. What the catalogue of banned and altered Adventure Time episodes reveals, taken together, is that the show as a globally distributed object has always been the sum of its regional versions, not the United States original. The United States original is one version. It is, for legal and historical reasons, the version that production records identify as the made object. It is the version that streaming has, over the past decade, gradually made available outside the United States. It is not the version that hundreds of millions of viewers grew up with. The version they grew up with is the version their feed delivered. Their feed delivered a version. The version was a translation. The translation was unannounced. The translation became, for them, the show. This is what the title of this essay points at when it says banned. The word banned is a useful shorthand, but it covers a wider range of acts than the word usually implies. The acts include outright refusal, cuts of a single shot, cuts of a verse, pulls from rotation after a single airing, omissions from streaming catalogues, and the broader pull of a show from a national broadcast environment. Each of these acts produces a different kind of absence. Each kind of absence shapes the show differently for the viewer who lives with that absence. The acts are not equivalent. The acts are members of a family. The family is the set of editorial decisions that happen between the production of an episode and the reception of an episode by a viewer. The family is large. The family touches almost every market the show has ever entered. The catalogue also has an internal asymmetry that this essay should name. The catalogue is heaviest at the seams of the show's run. The first season has one ban. The third and fourth seasons have a cluster of cuts and pulls. The fifth season has the song cut. The finale has its production level absence. The Distant Lands era has its regional omission. The Kenya case is broader than any single episode. The catalogue does not distribute evenly across the show's 11 seasons. The catalogue clusters at the moments when the show was most ambitious about the relationships and themes the international standards bodies had categories for. The clustering is not coincidence. The clustering is what happens when a show that wants to talk about complex emotional content meets a global broadcast environment that has a finite set of categories for what counts as inappropriate for children. The show in its United States form was permitted to be the show it wanted to be. The show in its international forms was permitted to be the show it could be after the standards bodies finished with it. The two outcomes are different. The two outcomes are both the show. The viewer who knows only one of them knows the show as that outcome. The viewer who is reading or watching this essay, having access through streaming to the United States cuts, may be encountering some of these episodes in their full form for the first time. The episode in their memory may be the cut version. The episode on their streaming service may be the uncut version. The two experiences are not the same. The viewer is meeting the show, in some cases, for the first time. There is something specific about this kind of late re-encounter that this essay wants to surface. The late re-encounter is the experience of receiving the version of the episode that the viewer was never delivered the first time. The late re-encounter is the experience of finding out that the song had a verse. The late re-encounter is the experience of finding out that there was a season 4 finale. The late re-encounter is the experience of finding out that the spoon shot existed, that Billy's introduction was an entire episode, that Meemail had a debut, that Goliad had repeat broadcasts in markets that were not the viewers. The late re-encounter is not the experience of correction. The late re-encounter is the experience of doubling. The viewer now has two versions of the episode in memory. The first version, the cut one, the original experience. The second version, the uncut one, the version the United States viewer had. Neither version goes away. Both versions remain in the viewer's relationship to the show. The negative space biography therefore continues to develop. The viewer who is now 30 years old, who watched Adventure Time as a teenager in Madrid or Manila or Nairobi, has accumulated, by 2026, several layers of the show. The first layer is the show they watched. The second layer is the show they read about. The third layer is the show they have now found in its uncut form. The three layers do not collapse into a single show. The three layers coexist. The viewer is holding three Adventure Times at once. The viewer's love for the show is for whatever combination of the three the viewer carries. This is the version of the show D that streaming has produced. The streaming version is, for the first time in the show's history, the same in most markets. The streaming version is closer, in most cases, to the United States cut than to the historical regional cut the viewer originally received. The streaming version's arrival is therefore, for many international viewers, a slow revelation of what the show actually was made as. The revelation does not erase what they grew up with. The revelation supplements it. The supplement creates the three-layer relationship this essay has been describing. The relationship is unusual. The relationship is more layered than the relationship the United States viewer typically has, because the United States viewer has only ever had one version. The international viewer has been given the gift, complicated and partial, of multiple versions of the same beloved object. There is a small late development to the what was missing story that this essay should circle back to. The song that Marceline sang in that episode became, in the years after, a recurring touchstone for the show's audience. The song traveled. The song was covered. The song was the song that the audience held up as evidence of what the show was willing to say even in its early seasons. The song's meaning, which had been contested in 2011, became, over the course of the decade, the meaning that the show itself eventually confirmed in Come Along With Me and in Obsidian. The song was, in retrospect, the show indicating early what it would later confirm. The Frederator recap that lost Dan Rickmers his job had read the song as romantic. The reading was, by the standards of 2011, premature. The reading was, by the standards of 2020 after Obsidian aired, accurate. The recap had been right. The recap had been right early. The cost of being right early was the job and the recap channel and the company's distance from the conversation. The cost was paid in 2011 by a producer who had read the song the way the show itself would later allow the song to be read. The cost was, in that sense, an early down payment on the reading the show was going to confirm in its own time. The down payment was paid by a single person. The reading became the consensus. This is the way subtext often resolves. The subtext is read early by someone who notices. The early reader is corrected or punished. The reading enters the unofficial canon. The unofficial canon waits. The show, given enough time, often catches up to the unofficial canon, and the unofficial canon becomes the official canon. The What Was Missing recap and its consequences are an early example of this pattern in this show's history. The pattern repeats in cases this essay has already traced. The pattern is the pattern of subtext becoming text by accumulation, with someone always paying the cost of being early. There is a small additional fact about Bad Little Boy that this essay wants to circle back to. The song in the United States cut runs for roughly 2 minutes. The song is structured in 3 verses. The first verse establishes the character's posture. The second verse complicates the posture. The third verse undermines the posture. The song is, in its full form, a structural argument that proceeds from claim to complication to undermining. The structural argument depends on hearing all 3 verses. The European cut, which removed roughly 40 seconds, removed material that contained portions of the complication and the undermining. The European cut therefore did not just shorten the song. The European cut removed the structural argument. The European cut left the listener with a song that mostly asserted the posture without complicating it. The European version of Marshall Lee's song is therefore a different character study than the United States version. The European Marshall Lee is more straightforwardly the character he claims to be. The United States Marshall Lee is the character who claims to be that, and then walks the claim back across the rest of the song. The 2 Marshall Lees are different people. The character that the European viewer met in 2012 had a smaller emotional range than the character the United States viewer met. The character returned in later Adventure Time episodes with the broader range the United States cut had established. The European viewer met the broader range later, in the returning appearances, without the foundation that the full version of the song would have laid. The viewer's relationship to the character was, again, shaped by the version their feed delivered. The Latin American cut, which substituted "I am not trying to be bad" for a line that did not contain that defense, produced a third Marshall Lee. The third Marshall Lee is one who preemptively defends himself against the reading the rest of the song will produce. The defense changes the song's structure entirely. The song now begins with an apology for what the song is about to do. The song never gets to undermine its own claim because the song has already disclaimed the claim. The Latin American Marshall Lee is the most evasive of the 3. The character is also, in many ways, the most fragile. The substitution made him fragile. The substitution is a co-authored character moment that the original writers did not author. There is a development in the Goliad arc that this essay can use to anchor a small additional observation. Goliad's introduction in Season 4, Episode 10 was followed, several episodes later in Season 5, by an episode that revisits Stormo and Goliad in their suspended psychic combat. The revisit is brief. The revisit confirms that the combat is still ongoing. The revisit assumes the viewer knows what the combat is and why it is happening. The viewer in the 4 markets that pulled Goliad from rotation, the viewer who saw the introductory episode once and could not return to it, would encounter the revisit with imperfect recall of what was being revisited. The revisit would read, for those viewers, as a continuation of something they could mostly remember. This is a specific kind of accumulated negative space. The negative space is not the absence of the episode itself. The negative space is the slow erosion of the viewer's memory of an episode they were only allowed to see once. The viewer in those markets does not have the episode in the same way the viewer in markets that ran the episode in rotation has the episode. The viewer in those markets has the episode the way a person has a long ago single experience. The episode is a fading memory. The arc that the show keeps assuming the viewer has, in fresh, repeatable form, the viewer has only as a worn version that has been remembered and re-remembered without source. The negative space biography includes this kind of erosion. The episode that aired once and then disappeared from rotation is not the same as the episode that aired repeatedly. The viewer's relationship to the once aired episode is a different kind of relationship. The viewer is less certain about details. The viewer is more dependent on conversation with other viewers. The viewer's experience of the show's arc, in the places where the arc reaches back to that episode, is filtered through the inevitable softening of single airing memory. The show's repetitions in markets without rotation become, in those markets, references that the viewer cannot fully verify against a source they own. There is a development around the lich in the Cartoon Network Arabic feed that this essay should mention. After years of the episode being absent from the rotation, the episode eventually became available in some Arabic language markets through streaming services that licensed the show in its uncut form. The viewers who had grown up without the episode could, by the late 2000s and into the 2020s, watch the episode for the first time as adults. The episode was, for those viewers, an event. The event was watching the Season 4 finale of a show they had finished a decade earlier. The event was the absence finally becoming present. What those viewers received was not just the episode. The viewers received the resolution of a question they had been carrying. The question was, what happened in the gap between the end of Season 4 and the beginning of Season 5? The question had been carried for years. The answer, when it arrived, was an 11-minute episode that did the work that those years of carrying had been asking it to do. The episode functioned, retroactively, as the finale of Season 4. The function was performed years after the broadcast. The function was performed for an audience that had already moved on. The function still landed. The episode was still doing the work the production had originally intended it to do, even with the decade-long delay. This is a hopeful note inside the catalogue. The negative space, in some cases, has been filled. The streaming era has slowly given many international viewers access to the versions of the show they did not originally receive. The access does not undo the years of absence. The access does, however, allow the viewer to integrate the missing piece into their understanding. The integration is late but real. The viewer's relationship to the show is now closer to what the United States viewer's relationship has always been. The closeness is partial. The closeness is enough to allow the viewer to see what they had been missing and to fold the now present material into their picture of the show. The hopeful note is also a complicated note. The closeness is not equivalence. The viewer who first encounters the Lich, a decade after the rest of the show, is not the viewer who first encountered it on its broadcast date. The episode lands differently in retrospect than it landed in prospect. The episode at the time of broadcast was an open question pointing forward into Season 5. The episode in 2024 is a closed question pointing backward into a show that has been finished for years. The episode is the same episode. The episode does different work depending on when in the viewer's relationship to the show the episode arrives. The work the episode does for the late viewer is the work of retroactive integration. The work is real. The work is also, in its way, a different work than the work the episode was made for. There is an additional fact about Come Along With Me that this essay can use to draw a small parallel. The kiss in the finale, like the song in Bad Little Boy and the moment in What Was Missing, became a touchstone in the way the audience discussed the show afterward. The kiss was held up as the show's confirmation of what the audience had read across years of episodes. The kiss was, in the production sense, an interpretive contribution from Hannah K. Nystrom. The interpretive contribution became the official record. The reading the audience had carried became the show. The pattern is the same pattern this essay has been tracing. The subtext is read. The reading is contested. The reading enters the unofficial canon. The show, given enough time, catches up. The kiss in Come Along With Me is the show catching up. The catching up is, in this case, not just the show. The catching up is a specific storyboard artist who interpreted Have a Moment as the moment the audience had been waiting for. The catching up is the artist's choice, plus the production's acceptance, plus the show's transmission of that acceptance to the audience. The show as it aired contains the catching up. The show as it aired is what the audience now has. What the international audiences in the song cut and shot cut markets received when the finale aired was the catching up without the foundation. The finale's confirmation lands harder when the cut episodes and the cut songs have not preconditioned the audience to read the relationship as text. The finale lands as an announcement rather than as a culmination. The announcement is satisfying. The announcement is also abrupt. The announcement, in the absence of the song cuts and the omitted episodes, would have landed differently. The international audience received the announcement with the conditioning of years of partial versions of the show, and the announcement therefore did a slightly different kind of work for that audience than it did for the United States audience. The work was, again, slightly different. The shadow library this essay has been describing is the library of all the things that the show was, in all the different places, after all the different hands had finished with it. The library is large. The library is uncatalogued by the production. The library exists only in the memories of viewers and in the records of regional standards teams, and in the fan documentation that has, over the past 15 years, gradually surfaced what was cut where. The library is, in some sense, the most accurate biography of the show. The library is what Adventure Time actually was, taken across the totality of its distribution. The library is the show. The made object, the United States cut, is one entry in the library. The made object is the entry that production records identify as the original. The made object is the entry that the streaming era has gradually elevated to a kind of global canonicity. The made object is the show as the production intended it. The made object is not, in any meaningful empirical sense, the show as it lived. The show as it lived in the regional cuts, and the regional refusals, and the regional substitutions, and the regional pulls, and the regional invisibilities. The show as it lived was thousands of slightly different things at once. The made object was the source. The made object was not the destination. The destinations were, in their plurality, the show. This is a thing the streaming era has begun to obscure, and this essay wants to register the obscuring as a loss. The streaming era's standardization of the catalogue, its gradual delivery of the United States cuts to most markets, is a generosity. The generosity has a cost. The cost is that the regional histories are becoming less visible. The viewer who streams Bad Little Boy in Poland in 2026 streams a song that contains all 3 verses. The viewer's children, watching the show for the first time on that streaming platform, will not know that the song was, for years, a different song in their country. The regional cut will, over time, recede. The made object will, over time, become what the show is in everyone's memory. The shadow library will become a thing one has to look up rather than a thing one has lived through. This essay is, in one of its quieter modes, a record of the shadow library before the recession completes. The catalogue of cuts and pulls and refusals will continue to exist in fan documentation and in industry reporting and in archives. The catalogue will not continue to exist as lived experience. The viewers who grew up with the cuts are the last generation that will have direct memory of them. The next generation will encounter the show in its streaming form and will not know what was once subtracted from it. The next generation will not have the 3-layer relationship the older generation has. The next generation will have a more uniform show. The more uniform show is, in many ways, a better gift to give a viewer. The viewer who sees the song's full structure can think about the structure. The viewer who sees the season 4 finale can hold the finale's beats. The viewer who sees the spoon shot can hear the joke. The uniform delivery is, for the new viewer, the best possible introduction to what the show was made as. The uniform delivery is also a slight flattening of what the show was. The show was many things. The show was made as one thing and lived as many. The uniform delivery is the one thing. The many things are receding. There is a small consolation, however, in the fact that the show itself was always interested in the gap between what was made and what is now. The show is full of characters who exist as the after-images of older versions of themselves. The Ice King is the after-image of Simon Petrikov. Marceline is the after-image of a child who saw the Mushroom War. Princess Bubblegum is the after-image of every revision of herself she has run through her own laboratory. The show is structurally a show about how an entity that was once one thing has become another thing, and about the relationship between the current entity and the older entity that the current one cannot quite remember being. The show is therefore, in a sense, formally prepared to think about its own regional histories. The show is a show about the gap between what was and what is. The show's own regional history is a particularly concrete example of the kind of gap the show was always meditating on. The audience that grew up with the cut versions and is now encountering the uncut versions is, in a small way, having the kind of experience the show's characters often have. The audience is meeting an earlier version of an object they thought they knew. The earlier version is the made version. The version the audience knew was a later version that had been processed by the chain of distribution. The earlier version is more complete in some ways. The earlier version is also less the version the audience has a relationship with. The audience's relationship is with the processed version. The relationship is real. The processed version is the version the relationship is with. The earlier version is now also part of the audience's library, but it is not the version the audience first loved. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. This essay wants to spend a moment now considering what these episodes share in their content, not just in their distribution. The episodes that drew regional refusals or cuts share certain features. The features are easy to enumerate and have already been touched on in passing. The features include direct depictions of violence inflicted by children, assassination plots, on-screen self-harm, even when clearly performed as a joke, romantic content involving same-sex characters, and apocalyptic mythological imagery. The features are not the only features in the show that might have drawn intervention. The features are the features that, in practice, did draw intervention. The catalogue of features is not the catalogue of all dark or complex material in the show. The catalogue is the subset of dark or complex material that was, in specific markets, machine-readable as inappropriate. The machine-readable nature of the intervention is worth dwelling on. The standards bodies that work these markets had to make decisions efficiently. The decisions had to be defensible against an internal review process. The decisions therefore tended to be made by reference to lists. The lists named specific actions or specific kinds of imagery. The lists did not name themes or implications. A scene that named or showed an action on the list was vulnerable to intervention. A scene that explored a theme similar to, but not literally on the list, was not. The show's stranger and quieter materials, its meditations on memory and mortality, and the impossibility of returning to childhood were not on any list. The materials were not cut. The materials were, in many ways, the more difficult materials the show was working with. The materials passed every regional gate without comment. This is part of why the show, in its international forms, retained almost all of its philosophical and emotional weight despite the cuts and refusals. The cuts and refusals were targeted at specific kinds of content. The targeted content was usually visible. The targeted content was usually short. The targeted content was usually a specific scene or song or episode. The show is mostly not made of targeted content. The show is mostly made of the slow accumulation of small character moments and atmospheric scenes that no list could identify as inappropriate. The slow accumulation aired in every market. The slow accumulation is what the show actually is. The cuts and refusals removed specific surfaces. The cuts and refusals did not remove the substrate. The substrate aired in Manila and Madrid and Nairobi and Lima and Beirut, more or less intact. Almost every week the show was on the schedule. This is a strange kind of consolation. The show, in its international forms, was almost the same show. The differences are real and they matter. The differences are also, in the larger sense, small. The viewer in any of these markets received what was, by total runtime, perhaps 97 or 98% of what the United States viewer received. The viewer received the same characters across the same arcs in mostly the same form. The viewer's relationship to the show is, at the level of accumulated experience, close to identical to the United States viewers. The differences cluster in specific places. The places are the places this essay has been cataloging. The places matter. The places are not the whole picture. The whole picture is a show that survived its translations with most of itself intact in every market. This essay also wants to note what is not in this catalog. The catalog does not contain a pajama war controversy, even though that episode has been mentioned in some fan circles as a candidate for international intervention. The available reporting does not document any standards action against that episode in any market this essay has been able to verify. The episode aired. The episode was discussed. The discussion was not the kind of discussion that produces a regulatory record. The episode is therefore not in this catalogue. The exclusion is a methodological choice. The catalogue is the catalogue of acts that left a trace. The acts that left no trace are, in this essay, treated as not having happened in the regulatory sense, regardless of what fan discourse may have asserted at the time. The catalogue also does not contain a Russian cut of the Come Along With Me finale, even though that cut has been rumoured in various places. The available reporting on the finale's international distribution does not document a Russian market intervention against the Kiss. The Kiss appears to have aired in the Russian Federation in 2018 in the form in which it aired in the United States. The catalogue does not include something that has been rumoured without verification. The catalogue is built from verified events. The verified events are the catalogue. The rumours are not. This methodological choice has the effect of making the catalogue smaller than the maximalist version of the catalogue that circulates in some fan spaces. The smaller catalogue is the more accurate catalogue. The accuracy is, for this essay, the relevant standard. The essay is interested in what actually happened. What actually happened is enough to support the argument. The argument does not need the unverified additions. The argument is structurally complete with the verified subset. The verified subset is what this essay has been working with. The argument, in summary, is that the show as it travelled was a different show in each place it travelled to. The differences were the cumulative effect of a chain of editorial decisions made between the production in Burbank and the screen in the viewer's home. The decisions were sometimes refusals at the gate, sometimes cuts within episodes, sometimes pulls from rotation, sometimes omissions from catalogues, sometimes substitutions inside translations, sometimes the broader pull of the show from a national broadcast environment. The decisions were largely invisible at the point of consumption. The decisions produced, in each market, the version of the show the viewer in that market grew up with. The version the viewer grew up with became, for that viewer, the show. The show was therefore many different things at once, depending on where the viewer was. The show was, in this sense, a globally distributed object whose globally distributed identity was not the made object, but the sum of the made object plus all the regional modifications. The sum is the show. The negative space biography is the biography of this sum. The biography is not the biography of the United States original. The biography is the biography of everything that was cut, refused, pulled, omitted, substituted, or removed, alongside everything that was retained. The biography is the shape of the show as it actually moved through the world. The biography is what this essay has been trying to draw. The drawing is necessarily incomplete. The regional records are partial. The fan documentation is partial. The industry reporting is partial. The viewers themselves are partial sources, with memories that have softened over the decades since the broadcasts. The full catalogue of cuts and refusals and pulls and omissions and substitutions across every Cartoon Network feed that ever carried Adventure Time will probably never be assembled. The full catalogue is a thing this essay has tried to gesture at the shape of, without claiming to have fully recovered. The shape is large. The shape is interesting. The shape is the show. What this essay has tried to do, in its specific cases, is to draw out a few of the most significant entries and to spend time with each. The entries are not the entire catalogue. The entries are the entries that this essay has been able to verify, and that, taken together, support the argument the essay is making. The argument is the negative space biography argument. The argument is that the show, as it lived, was the sum of all its regional versions, and that this sum was, in many cases, what the international viewer grew up with, regardless of what the United States production records list as the original cut. Let us return, briefly, to his hero, because this essay wants to make one additional observation about that episode. The episode features Billy. Billy returns repeatedly across the show's run. Billy's death in Season 5 is a major moment that shapes the rest of the show. Billy is referenced in the show's later mythology. Billy is a foundational figure in the world Finn comes from. The viewer in Australia, or the Philippines, who did not see his hero in 2010, nevertheless met Billy in subsequent appearances. The viewer constructed an understanding of Billy from those subsequent appearances. The constructed understanding was not necessarily worse than the United States viewer's understanding. The constructed understanding was just different. This is a quiet point worth holding. The Australian or Filipino viewer's relationship to Billy is not a damaged relationship. The relationship is a relationship built without the introductory episode. The relationship draws its weight from the later episodes that the viewer did see. The relationship is real. The relationship is, in its way, more constructed by the viewer than the United States viewer's relationship was, because the United States viewer was given a foundation that this viewer had to build. The construction is the viewer's contribution. The viewer's contribution is part of the show that this viewer carries. This is true across the catalogue. Every viewer of a cut or refused version of an Adventure Time episode constructed, in their own engagement with the show, the parts of the show the cut had removed. The construction was not always conscious. The construction was, often, the work of inference and pattern matching that any engaged viewer does. The construction filled in, more or less, the gaps the cuts had created. The construction was the viewer's own. The construction made the viewer's version of the show partly the viewer's own creation. The show in that viewer's memory is the show plus the construction. The construction is part of what the viewer loves about the show. The viewer loves a thing they helped make. This is, in some sense, true of all reception of fiction. The viewer is always partly the co-author of what they receive. The fact is more starkly true in the case of viewers whose feed delivered an incomplete version, because the gaps the construction had to fill were larger and more discrete. The viewer in those markets was more visibly a co-author than the viewer in markets that received the full version. The visibility of the co-authorship is part of what makes the international relationship to the show distinct. The relationship is more visibly the viewer's. The version the viewer has is more visibly the viewer's version. The show is, in those markets, more visibly a collaborative object between the production and the viewer than it is in markets where the production's version arrived intact. This collaboration is invisible from the production side. The production made what it made. The production did not negotiate with the viewers in the cut markets about what the viewers would fill in. The production did not even know, in many cases, which markets were cutting what. The collaboration is invisible from the viewer side too, because the viewer assumed the cut version was the full version and therefore did not consciously experience the fill-in as fill-in. The collaboration is visible only in retrospect, from the perspective this essay is taking. The collaboration is visible now because the streaming era has made the original versions accessible, and the international viewers can compare what they grew up with against what was made. The comparison reveals the gap. The gap is the space the construction filled. The construction is part of the show. The construction was not made by the production. The construction was made by the viewer. The construction is uncredited. The construction is also, perhaps, the most personal contribution the viewer ever made to the show. The viewer's contribution to the show is the show in their head. The show in their head is partly the production's work and partly their own. The construction is the viewer's signature on the show. The signature is invisible. The signature is the most legible thing about the viewer's relationship to the show. The accumulated effect of all of these constructions, across all of these markets, across all of these years, is that Adventure Time as a globally distributed object is also a globally co-authored object. The co-authors are the viewers. The co-authors are uncountable. The co-authors did not coordinate. The co-authors do not know about each other. The co-authors each have their own version of the show. The versions are different. The versions are all the show. The show is the sum. This is perhaps the strangest thing about a show that traveled this widely. The show is not in one place. The show is in many places at once. The show in each place is slightly different. The show in each place is the only version the viewer in that place can really know. The show is therefore a kind of dispersed identity, with no single point of authority. The made object in Burbank is one of many versions. The made object is not the only authority. The viewer's version is also an authority. The viewer's version is the version that exists for that viewer. The version that exists for that viewer is the show. If this essay had to name the thing it has been arguing in one sentence, the sentence would be something like, Adventure Time is the sum of the versions it became in each market it entered, and the international viewer's version, shaped by cuts and refusals and pulls and omissions and substitutions and the viewer's own construction across the gaps, is not a degraded copy of the made object, but a different and equally legitimate instance of the show. The sentence is long. The sentence has too many clauses. The sentence is the sentence the argument needs. The argument needs the long sentence because the argument is about a complicated relationship between a centralized production and a distributed reception. The complicated relationship cannot be summarized cleanly. The complicated relationship needs the clauses. The clauses are the argument. What the sentence implies, and what this essay wants to surface as it begins to close, is a question about what the word original means in the context of a globally distributed television show. The word usually implies the made object, the production master, the file that the producers signed off on. The word, in the context of this catalogue, has a more complicated referent. The word might also refer to the version the viewer grew up with. The version the viewer grew up with is, for that viewer, the original. The version is not the production master. The version is what the viewer first knew the show as. The version is the version the viewer's later understanding of the show is built on top of. The version is, in any meaningful psychological sense, the viewer's original. The word original therefore splits in this context. There is the production original, which is the United States cut. There is the personal original, which is whatever version the viewer first encountered. The two originals can be the same, in the case of a United States viewer. The two originals are usually different in the case of an international viewer. The two originals coexist. The two originals do not need to be reconciled. The viewer can hold both. The viewer's love for the show usually attaches to the personal original. The viewer's intellectual understanding of the show may attach to the production original. The two attachments are different in character. The two attachments together are the viewer's full relationship to the show. There is a moment in Come Along With Me that this essay wants to return to as it begins to close. The moment is brief. The moment is the kiss. The kiss is the production's chosen confirmation of an arc the show had been carrying. The kiss is also, in the production sense, an interpretive contribution from a single storyboard artist. The kiss is therefore both the show's official confirmation and a small individual act of authorship by a person who happened to be drawing that panel that month. The kiss is, in a sense, a model of what this essay has been arguing about the show as a whole. The show as a whole is the sum of an official intention and a chain of small individual acts of authorship by people inside the production and inside the regional standards teams and inside the viewer's own engagement with the work. The show is what all of those small acts produced. The kiss happens. The episode continues. The series ends. The show, as a made object, is finished. The show, as a globally distributed and globally co-authored object, continues to exist in the memories and rewatch histories and ongoing conversations of its viewers. The show continues to be different things in different places. The show continues to be the version each viewer holds. The show continues to be, in this sense, in motion, even after the production has stopped. The show is the show in each viewer's library. The library contains the cuts and refusals and omissions and pulls and substitutions and constructions that this essay has been describing. The library is the show. There is one final consideration this essay wants to surface before its close. The consideration is about what this catalogue says about the broadcast era of children's television more generally. The broadcast era, which is roughly the era from the start of cable through the consolidation of streaming, was an era in which globally distributed children's animation was almost always processed through regional standards teams. The processing was, almost always, invisible to the viewer. The processing produced, almost always, a regional version that differed from the production master. The viewer in any given market grew up with the regional version. The catalogue of differences was, in most cases, not documented. The catalogue of differences is, in the case of Adventure Time, partially documented because the show had a particularly engaged international fan base that did the work of comparing cuts and reporting differences. The catalogue is therefore more legible for this show than for most. The legibility is a gift of fan labour. What the catalogue suggests, by extension, is that almost every major children's animated property of the broadcast era has a similar shadow library. The shadow library is largely unrecovered. The shadow library would, if recovered, show that many of the foundational properties of childhood entertainment in the late 20th and early 21st centuries were never single objects. They were always plural objects, with regional versions that have, in most cases, never been gathered into a single document. The Adventure Time Shadow Library, This essay has been describing is a particularly visible example of a phenomenon that is general. The phenomenon is broadcast itself. The phenomenon is what happens when a single production has to pass through many regional gates to reach many regional audiences. The phenomenon is older than this show and broader than this show. This show is just one of the cases where the documentation exists. The streaming era is, in part, a project of collapsing this kind of regional variation. The streaming era's libraries aspire to be the same in every market they serve. The aspiration is not always met. The aspiration is, in some cases, blocked by regional regulators who require omissions or modifications even on streaming platforms. The Obsidian omission in Southeast Asia is one example. The Kenyan regulatory pool is another. But the streaming era's general direction is towards standardization. The standardization is good for many things. The standardization is also a loss of the kind of regional variation that defined the broadcast era. The standardization is producing, slowly, a generation of viewers who will know shows as single objects rather than as plural objects. The plurality of the broadcast era is, in this sense, a thing that is ending. This essay's interest in the shadow library is partly an interest in documenting the plurality before it ends. The documenting is incomplete. The documenting is also necessary. The plurality was a real thing. The plurality shaped how the show was received in dozens of markets. The plurality was the show as much as the made object was. Letting the plurality recede without documentation would be letting an important part of the show's actual history disappear. The documentation that exists is largely fan documentation. The fan documentation is what this essay has been drawing on. The fan documentation is the only record we have of much of what this essay has been describing. The fan documentation is precious for that reason. The fan documentation is, in some sense, the show's actual archive. There is also a small additional thought this essay wants to register about what it means for a globally distributed show to be a globally co-authored show. The thought is that the relationship between production and audience, in this kind of arrangement, is more reciprocal than the standard model of producer and consumer admits. The production made the made object. The audience, in every market, modified the made object through the chain of regional standards teams and through their own engagement and through their own constructions across the cuts. The audience's modifications produced the show as it actually existed in their market. The production did not make that show. The audience, in collaboration with the regional standards teams, did. The show that exists in any market is the production's contribution plus the audience's contribution plus the regional standards team's contribution. The show is the sum. The made object is, in some sense, just the seed. The seed grew differently in different soils. The plants that grew are not the seed. The plants are the seed plus the soil plus the gardener. The viewer is the gardener. The regional standards team is the soil. The made object is the seed. The plant is what the viewer eventually loves. The plant is the show. This metaphor is generous. The metaphor flatters the regional standards teams by calling them soil rather than calling them what they often were, which was teams making decisions about what children could see in their markets, according to lists they did not write and could not modify. The metaphor flatters the viewer by calling them gardeners. The viewer was often simply a child watching what was on. The metaphor flatters the made object by calling it a seed. The made object was a finished production. The metaphor is loose. The metaphor is also, in its loose way, accurate. The show grew. The show grew differently in different places. The show is the plants, not the seed. The audience is the gardener even when the audience did not know it was gardening. This essay is now approaching its close. The argument has been made. The cases have been described. The pattern has been named. The pattern is the negative space biography of a globally distributed show. The biography is the biography of the show as a sum of versions. The versions are produced by the made object plus the regional modifications. The viewer in any market lives with one of the versions and loves that version. The version the viewer lives with is the show for that viewer. The show for that viewer is real. The show for that viewer is the show. The catalogue of specific episodes this essay has worked through includes His Hero, The Creeps, Jake vs. Meemaw, What Was Missing, Goliad, The Lich, Bad Little Boy, Come Along With Me, and the Distant Lands episode Obsidian, plus the broader Kenyan pool of the show from DSTV and GOTV in June 2017. The catalogue is not exhaustive. The catalogue is the set of cases that, taken together, support the argument the essay has been making. The catalogue is also, this essay hopes, an interesting set of cases in its own right. Each case has its own internal life. Each case is a small story about a specific episode and a specific market and a specific intervention and a specific resulting version of the show. The cases share a structure. The structure is that an episode was made in Burbank, transmitted to a regional broadcast operator, modified or refused or pulled or omitted or substituted by the regional operator according to a regional standards rulebook, and delivered to the viewer in a form that differed from the production master. The viewer received the modified form as the show. The modified form became, for the viewer, what the show was. The unmodified form, the production master, existed elsewhere, in another market, often unavailable to this viewer until the streaming era made it accessible. The viewer in the streaming era can now compare. The comparison reveals the modification. The modification, revealed, becomes part of the viewer's relationship to the show. The viewer now holds two versions. The two versions coexist. The viewer is, in this respect, a richer viewer than the viewer who has only ever known one version. This is, perhaps, the closing image this essay wants to leave the listener with. The international viewer of Adventure Time, in 2026, who grew up with cuts and refusals and pulls and omissions and substitutions, is a viewer with a richer library than the United States viewer who has only ever known the production master. The international viewer has the production master, accessible now through streaming, plus the regional version, accessible through memory, plus the construction the viewer did across the gaps in the regional version. The international viewer has 3 Adventure Times. The United States viewer has 1. The 3 are not in conflict. The 3 are, taken together, the show as that viewer has known it across their life. The library is the viewer's. The library is the show. This essay has tried, across the previous however many minutes, to draw a map of that library for one specific case, which is the case of the banned and altered Adventure Time episodes. The map is partial. The map is, this essay hopes, useful. The map is, this essay also hopes, a way of honoring the viewers who grew up with the regional versions and who did the quiet work of holding what they were given as if it were the whole. It was the whole for them. It is the whole in the sense that matters. The made object is one whole. Their version is another. Both are whole. Both are the show. The made object in Burbank, the production master that the production records identify as the original, is the version that streaming has, for the past few years, been gradually delivering to global audiences. The delivery is the closing of a long gap. The gap was open from 2010, when the show began, until roughly the early 2020s, when streaming had matured enough to deliver the production master to most markets. The gap was open for roughly a decade. The gap is now closing. The closing is gradual. The closing will probably not be total. Some regional regulators will continue to require omissions and modifications even on streaming. The closing will, however, be substantial. The future of the show's reception, taken in the very long term, is probably a future in which the made object is what most viewers know. This is, in some sense, the show's eventual return to its production form. The show was made as the production form. The show lived for a decade as many forms. The show is returning, slowly, to its production form. The return is asymmetric. The return is incomplete. The return is real. The viewer of the show in 2036 will probably know the show as something close to the production master. The viewer of the show in 2026 still knows it, mostly, as the version their feed delivered. The transition between those two viewers is happening now. This essay is, in a small way, a marker of the transition. The marker is the catalogue. The catalogue is the record of what was different about the international forms. The catalogue will, this essay hopes, be carried forward by viewers who experience those forms. The carrying forward is the work of memory. The carrying forward is the work of conversation. The carrying forward is the work of essays like this one. The essays are not the catalogue. The essays gesture at the catalogue. The catalogue itself is in the memories of millions of viewers across dozens of markets. The catalogue is large. The catalogue is the show. The verse that did not air in Poland in 2012 is, in 2026, available to the Polish viewer who streams the episode on the current version of the platform that carries Adventure Time in that market. The verse is, for that viewer, new. The verse is also the missing part of a song the viewer has known for 14 years. The verse is, in the negative space sense, the resolution of an absence the viewer did not know they were carrying. The verse is, when the viewer hears it for the first time, both a discovery and a recovery. The discovery is of material the viewer did not know the song contained. The recovery is of a structural completeness the song's truncated version lacked. The verse is 40 seconds. The 40 seconds changed the song. The song now does what it was made to do. The song's claim, complication, and undermining are all present. The song lands. The song's landing is, in 2026, the song landing for the Polish viewer for the first time. The first time is 14 years after the song was made. The first time is, in the show's distribution history, a kind of late arrival. The late arrival is the kind of arrival the negative space biography produces. The made object, after a long delay, finally arrives at the viewer who has been waiting for it without knowing they were waiting. The viewer hears it. The viewer holds it. The viewer's library is now slightly more complete. The viewer's library is the show. If this essay had to choose one image to close on, the image would be that one. The image is the Polish viewer hearing the missing 40 seconds of Marshall Lee's song in 2026 for the first time. The image is the viewer recognizing the song while also encountering it as new. The image is the small moment of recognition, the slight expansion of the viewer's library, the quiet addition to the viewer's relationship with the show. The image is the negative space briefly filling in. The image is the show. After 14 years, finishing the sentence it had started but had not been allowed to complete in that market. The image is the made object and the personal original meeting each other in the viewer's living room. The image is the resolution. The image is also, in its way, the beginning of the viewer's new relationship with the show, which is the relationship of the viewer who knows both versions. Both versions are the show. Both versions have always been the show. The viewer has, in some sense, always been carrying both versions, with the second version present as the negative space the first version's missing 40 seconds carved into the song. The second version's eventual delivery is the negative space taking shape. The shape is the missing 40 seconds. The shape, given material form, is the song as it was made. The song as it was made is the shape the negative space had always implied. The negative space is now full. The show is now, in that song, complete for that viewer. The completion is 14 years late. The completion is real. The catalogue of all the negative spaces in all of the international versions of this show is the catalogue this essay has been working with. The catalogue is, in some places, being filled by the streaming era's delivery of the production master. The catalogue is, in other places, still empty, with episodes still omitted from regional libraries, with the show still pulled from some national broadcast environments, with the original regional cuts no longer broadcast, but not yet replaced by uncut streaming alternatives in every market. The catalogue is in motion. The catalogue will continue to be in motion for as long as the show is distributed. The catalogue is the show's continuing life as a globally distributed object. The show, taken as the sum of all of these regional versions, is a larger and more complicated thing than the production master. The show is the production master plus everything that happened to it as it traveled. The show is what every viewer in every market grew up with. The show is the show in each of their memories. The show is in motion, still, even now, decades after its first episode, because every time a new viewer encounters it on a new platform in a new market, with whatever the current regional configuration is, the show takes on another small version, and that version is, for that viewer, the show. Adventure Time, as a show, ended in 2018 with the airing of Come Along With Me, the 4 Distant Lands specials wrapped up by 2021. The franchise is, in its production sense, complete. The show, in its distribution sense, is ongoing. The show continues to be received by new viewers. The show continues to be modified by the chains of distribution it passes through. The show continues to become slightly different things in slightly different places. The show is, in this sense, still being made, in the sense that the show as a globally co-authored object is still gathering new versions, even though no new episodes are being produced. The made object is finished. The show is not. The show will not be finished as long as it is being watched. The show will be modified by every subsequent regional standards decision, by every subsequent platform's library management, by every subsequent regulatory environment that decides what can air where. The show will continue to have new negative spaces and new fillings and new pulls and new restorations. The show will continue to be the sum of all of these. The show will continue to be what each viewer in each market lives with. This is, perhaps, the final shape of the argument. The show is not a finished object even though its production has finished. The show is an ongoing thing, a thing that gets remade in every act of distribution and reception. The show is, in this sense, alive. The show is alive in the most concrete way an artwork can be alive, which is that it continues to be received and to be modified in reception and to become slightly different things in slightly different places without anyone's specific intention. The show is alive because it has not stopped being read. The show will be alive as long as it is being read. The show will, by that measure, probably be alive for a long time. The negative space biography is the biography of an artwork that is alive in this particular way. The biography records the modifications. The modifications are the artwork's life. The modifications are not the artwork's wounds. The modifications are the artwork's circulation. The artwork is the modifications and the original, taken together. The artwork is what circulates. The circulation is the show. The made object remains, available now, in most markets, through streaming. The made object is the version that the production team in Burbank signed off on. The made object is the version that the production records identify as the original. The made object is one important version. The made object is not the only one. The viewer who knows only the made object knows one version of the show. The viewer who knows the regional cuts plus the made object knows more versions. The viewer who knows the show across multiple eras, multiple markets, multiple platforms, knows the largest and most complete version of the show available to any single human being. The viewer who knows that much is rare. The viewer who knows that much is the viewer whose library is, in this peculiar sense, the show's most accurate biography. This essay has tried to gesture at what that library looks like. The library is too large to fully describe. The library is partly recovered in fan documentation, partly accessible through streaming, partly only available in viewer memories that are slowly softening with time. The library is, in its full shape, beyond reconstruction. The library is, in its partial shape, what this essay has been pointing at. The library is the show. The library is what Adventure Time actually was, across all the places it was, across all the years it has been on the air or in the catalogues. The viewer who has stayed with this essay has, by this point, accumulated a long sequence of cases. The cases have been a song, an episode, another episode, a finale, a special, a national pool, a recap firing, a storyboard interpretation, and the broader pattern these cases together suggest. The pattern is the pattern of the negative space biography. The pattern is the pattern of a show that lived as many shows. The pattern is the pattern of a centralized production whose product was received as 1,000 distinct objects, each modified by the chain that delivered it, each loved by the viewers in the market it arrived in, each as much the show as the made object was. The accumulated effect of staying with the catalogue for this long is, this essay hopes, a slight expansion of the listener's sense of what the show is. The show is not only the production master, the show is also the regional cuts, the show is also the omissions, the show is also the constructions the viewer made to fill in what the cuts had removed. The show is the sum. The expansion of the sense is the recognition of the sum. The recognition is the small thing this essay wanted to leave the listener with, alongside the more concrete details about specific episodes and specific cuts. The specific episodes will stay specific. His hero will continue to be the episode about non-violence that did not air in Australia and the Philippines. The Creeps will continue to be the episode with the spoon cut absent from the Asia Pacific. Jake vs. Meow will continue to be the episode about the assassin cat that 2 markets refused. What Was Missing will continue to be the episode that ended Mathematical and the Frederator recap channel. Goliad will continue to be the episode that aired once in 4 European markets and then was pulled. The Lich will continue to be the season 4 finale that did not exist in the Cartoon Network Arabic catalogue for years. Bad Little Boy will continue to be the song that lost 40 seconds in 4 European markets and got a substituted line in Latin America. Come Along With Me will continue to be the finale where the kiss was, in the production, an interpretive contribution from Hannah K. Nystrom. Obsidian will continue to be the Distant Lands special omitted from Southeast Asia. The June 2017 Kenya pull will continue to be the regulatory action that removed the show from DSTV and GOTV for an entire country. These are the cases. These are the facts. These are the entries in the catalogue. The catalogue is, this essay hopes, useful as a record. The catalogue is, this essay also hopes, useful as a way of thinking about the kind of object Adventure Time has been across its decade and a half of distribution. The kind of object is plural. The kind of object is collaborative across borders. The kind of object is the kind of object the broadcast era produced in many cases, but that this particular show has been documented for in unusual detail. The documentation will probably continue. The fan community around the show is engaged and detailed. The industry reporting on the show, while less common now that the production has finished, continues to surface occasional new information about the show's distribution history. The catalogue will probably grow. The catalogue will probably be revised. The catalogue will probably never be complete. The catalogue as it stands is what this essay has been working with. Sit with the catalogue for a moment. The catalogue is a long list of small interventions, made at desks in offices in cities the show's creators have never been to, by people whose names the show's audience does not know, against a production they did not collaborate on, in service of regulatory environments most viewers cannot articulate. The interventions, taken together, produced a show that was, in many markets, never quite the show the production made. The show in those markets was its own thing. The show in those markets was loved as its own thing. The show in those markets is, in the most important sense, the show. This is the closing version of the thesis. The show is the show in each viewer's memory. The memory is shaped by what the viewer's feed delivered. The feed delivered, in each market, a version that had been shaped by the regional chain of distribution. The chain of distribution is part of what made the show what it is for the viewer. The viewer's relationship to the show is a relationship to that specific version. The version is the show for that viewer. The show, taken across all viewers, is the sum of all of those versions. The sum is the show. The made object remains the keystone. The made object is the version production records identify as original. The made object is the version that streaming has, for the past decade, gradually delivered to global audiences. The made object is one of many versions. The made object is the keystone of the arch the show forms, but the arch itself includes all the other stones. The arch is what carries the weight. The arch is the show. The arch could not stand without all of its stones. The made object alone could not stand. The arch is the sum. This essay closes here. The closing is not a summary. The closing is an image. The image is the arch. The image is many stones, made in different places, brought together into a structure that holds. The structure is Adventure Time as a globally distributed show. The stones are the regional versions. The stones are the production master and all of its translations and modifications and constructions. The arch holds. The arch is still holding, 14 years after the first episode aired, 8 years after the original series finale, 6 years after the last Distant Lands special. The arch is still standing. The arch is still being added to, slowly, by new viewers encountering the show in whatever form the current distribution delivers it. The arch is the show. The arch is alive. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.